I'm going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions. Use this device to answer. The first question is, how did the number of deaths per year from natural disaster, how does that change during the last century? Did it more than double? Did it remain about the same in the world as a whole, or did it decrease to less than a half? Please answer, A, B, or C. I see lots of answers. This is much faster than I do it at universities. They are so slow, they keep thinking. Oh, very, very good. And we go to the next question. So how long did women 30 years old in the world go to school? 7 years, 5 years, or 3 years? A, B, or C? Please answer. And we go to the next question. In the last 20 years, how did the percentage of people in the world who live in extreme poverty change? Extreme poverty, not having enough food for the day. Did it almost double? Did it remain more or less the same, or did it half? A, B, or C? Now, answers. You see, death from natural disasters in the world. You can see it from this graph here, from 1900 to 2000. In 1900, there was about 500,000 people who died every year from natural disaster. Floods, earthquake, volcanic eruption, whatever, droughts. And then, how did that change? We asked, Gapminder asked the public in Sweden. This is how they answered. The Swedish public answered like this. 50% thought it had doubled, 38% said it's more or less the same, 12% said it had halved. This is the best data from the disaster researchers. And it goes up and down, and it goes to the Second World War, and after that it starts to fall, and it keeps falling, and it's down to much less than a half. The world has been much, much more capable as the decades go back to protect people from this, So only 12% of the Swedes know this. So I went to the zoo and I asked the chimps. Can you see? The chimps doesn't watch the evening news. So the chimps, they just choose by random. So the Swedes answer worse than random. Now, how did you do? That's you. You were beaten by the chimps. But it was close. You were 3 times better than the Swedes, But that's not enough. You shouldn't compare yourself to Swedes, You must have higher ambitions in the world. Let's look at the next answer here. Women in school. Here you can see men went 8 years. How long did women go to school? Well, we asked the Swedes like this. And that gives you a hint, doesn't it? The right answer is probably the one where fewest Swedes pick, isn't it? Let's see. Here we come. Yes. Women have almost catched up. This is the US public. And this is you. Here you come. Ooh. Well, congratulations, you're twice as good as the Swedes, but you're not with me. So how come? I think it's like this, that everyone is aware of that there are countries and there are areas where girls have great difficulties. They are stopped when they go to school, and it's disgusting. But in the majority of the world, where most people in the world live, most countries, girls today go to school as long as boys, more or less. That doesn't mean that gender equity is achieved, not at all. They still are confronted to terrible limitations. But schooling is there in the world today. Now, we miss the majority. When you answer according to the worst places, and there you are right, but you miss the majority. What about poverty? Well, it's very clear that poverty here was almost halved. And in US, when we asked the public, only 5% got it right. And you? You almost made it to the chimp. That little, just a few of you, There must be preconceived ideas, And many in the rich countries, they think that, oh, we can never end extreme poverty. Of course they think so, because they don't even know what has happened. The first thing to think about the future is to know about the present. So this is where I realized that there was really a need to communicate, because the data of what's happening in the world and the child health of every country is very well aware. So we did this software which displays it like this. Every bubble here is a country. This country over here is, this is China. This is India. The size of the bubble is the population. And on this axis here, I put fertility rate. Because my students, what they said when they looked upon the world, and I asked them, what do you really think about the world? Huh? Well, I first discovered that the textbook was Tintin mainly. And they said the world is still we and them. And we is Western world, and them is third world. And what do you mean with Western world? I said, well, that's long life in small family, and third world is short life in large family. So this is what I could display here. I put fertility rate here, number of children per woman, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 8 children per woman. We have very good data since 1962, 1960 about, on the size of families in all countries. The error margin is narrow. Here I put life expectancy at birth, from 30 years in some countries up to about 70 years. And 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still 2 types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see. We start the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see there? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there. But now Bangladesh, it's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world. Let me make a comparison directly between United States of America and Vietnam. 1964. America had small families and long life. Vietnam had large families and short lives. And this is what happens. The data during the war indicate that even with all the death, there was an improvement of life expectancy. By the end of the year, the family planning started in Vietnam, and they went for smaller families. And the United States up there is getting for longer life, keeping family size. And in the 80s now, they give up communist planning and they go for market economy, and it moves faster even than social life. And today we have in Vietnam the same life expectancy and the same family size here in Vietnam 2003 as in United States 1974 by the end of the war. I think we all, if we don't look in the data, we underestimate the tremendous change in Asia, which was in social change before we saw the economical change. Child survival drives everything. Let's go back into history. Why did the world population grow so slowly before 1800? Well, throughout history, all historical records show us that on average, 2 parents got more or less 6 children. But that looks as a very fast population growth. So why didn't it grow? Because 1, 2, 3, 4 of the children died before growing up to become parents themselves. People in the past never lived in ecological balance with nature. They died in ecological balance with nature. It was utterly tragic. But with the Industrial Revolution, this changed. Better wages, more food, tapped water, better sanitation, soap, medical advances, you know. So why did then, from all these advances, why did population grow? Was it because they got more children? No. 1963, that year when I was at school, actually the number of children per woman had decreased a little in the world to 5. And the reason for the fast population growth was the improved child survival. 4 survived at that time. But still, 1 out of 5 died. That was still terrible. So it's only in the recent decades that most of the countries have taken big leap forwards in child survival and in family planning, so that we are now approaching the new balance. And it's a nice balance. 2 parents on average get 2 children that survive. We have families in a very happy balance. This is the most normal family situation in the world today. And what does this mean for the future here? I will show you the projection, the best projection into the future from the finest demographers we have at the Population Division of the United Nations. And it looks like this. It's going to continue first up to 8, and then it goes up to 9, and then it goes here. But see, it's slowing down. By the end of the century, it's becoming more flat there. And if I do a close-up on this, you can see that we are expecting a slowing down and the end of fast population growth. But of course, this is a projection that has a certain degree of uncertainty. But we are sure that we are at the end of fast population growth within this century. It's all due to a remarkable effect of the falling fertility rate. Look here, if we go back into this. I'll show this by showing you the number of children in the world. The number of children from 0 to 15 years of age. Here they come. Look, the number of children there increased slowly, and then also it increased rapidly. So by the turn of the century here, there were 2 billion children in the world. And to me, that was an important year, because that was when Doris was born. That's my first grandchild. And she was born at a very special time for children in the world, you know. Because the specialists, the demographers, estimate that from this year, the number of children in the world will continue like this. It will not increase any longer. By the end of the century, we will still have 2 billion children in the world. When Doris was born is when the world entered into the age of peak child. The number of children are not increasing. Now, this will confuse you, because how can then the total population grow like this if the children doesn't increase? Where will all these adults come from? And to explain that, I have to leave this fancy digital stuff and show you real powerful educational material we have developed. And it's here. I will show you the world population, ladies and gentlemen, in the form of foam blocks. 1 block is 1 billion. 1 block is 1 billion. And that means that we have 2 billion children in the world. Then we have 2 billion between 15 and 30 years of age. These are rounded numbers. We have 1 billion 30 to 45. We have 1 billion 45 to 60. And then we have my block, 60 years and older. We are here on top. This is the world population today. And you can see that there are 3 billions missing, like here. Only few of them are missing because they have died. Most of them are missing because they were never born. Because back then, you know, before 1980, there were much fewer children born in the world because there were fewer women giving birth to children. So this is what we have today. Now, what will happen in the future? Do you know what happens to old people like me? They die. Yes. There was someone here who works in hospitals. Yeah? So they die. The rest, they grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. These ones are now old, time to die. And then these ones grow 15 years older and they have 2 billion children. This one die and the rest grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. And without increasing the number of children, without increasing the length of life, We have 3 billion people more by this big inevitable fill-up of adults, which will happen just when the large young generations grow up. Now, there's one more detail, which is good news for the older ones here, like me, that it's estimated that the old people will live a little longer. So we have to add 1 billion more for the old here on the top. And I'm desperately hoping that I will be part of that group, because then I can live long and read the annual statistic as they come reporting every year. But when I talk to many fine environmental activists, which are really have a good concern about the environment, they very often tell me, we have to stop population growth at 8 billion. But when I then talk with them, first they don't know that we have reached peak child. And then they are completely unaware that most of the remaining population growth is an inevitable fill-up of adults. So we will end up with more or less this amount of people. So we know how many billions there will be, but what about where they live? Now and in the future. There you have the world, and here are the 7 billion. Now, out of the 7 billion, 1 live in the America, North and South together. 1 in Europe, 1 in Africa, and 4 in Asia. So this is now, but how to remember this? I have a very simple way of remembering this. I put up the numbers like this, and then I say, this is the PIN code of the world, 1114. Now, what will happen up to mid-century? That we know fairly well. Europe, no increase. In fact, the European population is decreasing. In America, a little more people, mainly retired people in Latin America. So it makes no difference. It's more or less the same. In Asia, we will have 1 billion more. And then the population growth in Asia is over. In Africa, in the next 40 years, the population will double to 2 billion. Now, to the end of the century, well, we know quite well, no more people in Europe, no more in America, no more in Asia. But Africa is set, as we have data today, for another doubling. So there will be 4 billions in Africa. The 2100, and probably the final PIN code, will be 1145. So in 2100, there will be quite a different world. The people who live in what I call the Old West, in West Europe and North America, will by then be less than 10% of the world population. 80% of the world population will be living in Asia and Africa. But will there be resources enough to sustain them? Well, this will be a huge challenge, and nothing will come automatically. But my take is that it is possible for all these billions to live well together. Andre and Olivia live in one of the poorest countries, and they live in the rural area, which is the poorest part of that country. So how many people are there in the world living like they? And how many are there that are poorer? I'm going to show you this yardstick. Very simple, poor and rich. And here I have all the 7 billions again. They are in a very simplified way lined up there from the poorest to the richest. Now, how much does the richest billion earn here in dollar per day? Well, let's look here. Ooh, it's coming up, it's coming up. Ooh, yo. I can't even reach $100 a day. Then let's look at the middle billion, who is exactly in the middle. How much do they earn? It'll come, yes, just 10. And then I go over here to the poorest billion. How much do they get? Well, just 1. This is the difference of the world today. And the economists, they draw a line which they call the line for extreme poverty, a little above $1. That's when you hardly can have enough food to feed the family. You cannot be sure that you have food all days, you know. And 1 billion is clearly below that still. And the 2nd billion is sort of divided by that line. And then the others are above it. Now, the poorest people, they can hardly afford to buy shoes. And when they get shoes, the next thing they will save for is bicycle. This is where Andre and Olivia is. And after bicycle, you will go for the motorbike. And then after the motorbike, it's the car. And I remember when my family got the first car. It was a small grey Volkswagen. The first thing we did was to go to Norway on holiday, because Norway is so much more beautiful than Sweden. It was a fantastic trip. And now I'm in this group. I can go, like the richest billion, we can go on holiday by airplanes. Of course, there are people who are much richer than the airplane people. Some are so rich, so they're even contemplating that they should go as tourists out into space. And the difference in income from the airplane people to the very richest over there is almost as big as it is from the airplane people here, you know, all the way down to the poorest in that side. Now, the most important to remember from this yardstick is this. And I need to show you this, I need my stepladder. Sometimes you need some old, well-functioning technology also. Here. I can only reach up. Here they are. Now I'm at the top. The problem for us living on $100 a day is that when we look down on those who have $10 or $1, they look equally poor. We can't see the difference. It looks as if everyone is living on the same amount of money. And they say, oh, they are all poor. No, I can assure you, because I've met and talked with people who live down here, and I can assure you that the people down here, they know very well how much better life would be if they would move from $1 to $10, 10 times as much income. This is a huge difference, you know. And to understand this, this is what Olivia and Andre is trying to do now. Each little step they take along this line here, you know, from the shoes towards the bicycle, small as it may seem from far distance, make a huge difference in their life. And if Andre and Olivia would get that bicycle, it would speed them along to better life and better wealth up in this end. The common view about the world is outdated with several decades. The media have missed to communicate it. But perhaps this is because the world is changing so fast. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you my all-time favorite graph. I'm going to show you the history of 200 countries during 200 years in less than 1 minute. I have an axis for income. I have an axis for lifespan. I start in 1800, and there are all the countries. And back in 1800, everyone was down in the poor and sick corner. Can you see? Low lifespan, little money. And here comes the effect of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the countries in West Europe, they are coming to better wealth, but they are not getting much healthier in the beginning. And those under colonial domination doesn't benefit anything in there. They remain there in the sick and poor corner. And now health is improving, health is slowly improving here. It's getting up here, and we are coming into the new century, and the terrible First World War, and then the economic recession after that, and then the Second World War. And now, independence. And with independence, health is improving faster than it ever did in other countries here. And now starts the fast economic catch-up of China and other Latin American countries. They come on here, you know, and India is following there, and the African countries is also following. It's an amazing change that has happened in the world. You know, in the front here, we have now US and UK, but they're not moving so fast any longer. The fast movers are here in the middle. China is moving very fast to catch up. And Bangladesh, look, Bangladesh is already here, now quite healthy, and now starting with fast economic growth. And Mozambique, yes, Mozambique is back there, but they are now moving fast in the right direction. But all this I show you is country averages. What about people? Have people also got a better life? I'm now going to show you something which makes me very excited as a statistician. I'm going to show you income distribution, the difference between people. And to do that, I take the bubbles back 50 years, and then we are going to look only at money. And to do that, we have to expand and adjust the axis, because the richest is so rich and the poorest is so poor. So this will be a bigger difference than between the countries. And what we do now is that we let the country fall down here, this is United States, and spread to show the range within the country. And I take down all the countries in the Americas. And now you can see from the richest person to the poorest person. And the height here shows you how many there are on each income level. And now let's take down Europe. And on top of that, I'm going to put Africa. And finally, the region with most people on top of everything, Asia. Now, in 1963, the world was constituted by two humps. First, the richest hump. It's like a camel, isn't it? The first hump here with the richest is mainly Europe and the Americas. And the poorest hump over here is mainly Asia and Africa. And the poverty line was there. Can you see how many people there were in extreme poverty 50 years ago? And most of them were in Asia. And people were saying Asia will never get out of poverty. Exactly as some people are still saying about Africa today. Now, what has happened? I start the world. And you can see that many people are born into poverty here, but Asia goes towards higher income, and 1 billion goes out of extreme poverty this way, and the whole shape of the world changed, and the camel is dead. It's reborn as a dromedary. And what you can see here, you know, is the variation from the richest, that is most people in the middle. And there's a much smaller proportion of the world now in extreme poverty. But be careful, it's still a lot of people, more than 1 billion people in extreme poverty.